Good evening, Tansei, and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. Today at the Assembly of First Nations Special Chiefs Assembly in Ottawa, things got off to a slow start with major delays on resolutions voting. APTN's Fraser Needham is on the scene with more.
I'm here at day 2 of the Assembly of First Nations winter meeting in Ottawa. This morning, Chiefs were scheduled to deal with resolutions on the $20 billion Child Welfare Agreement the AFN signed with the federal government earlier this year. But major delays meant this did not happen. These resolutions are important because the deal that the AFN signed with the Trudeau government has never been voted on by the General Assembly. Chiefs here expressed frustration that these resolutions have still not been dealt with because they've been on the books since the Vancouver Assembly in July. Not to mention the fact that the deal in its current form does not meet the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal's standards. At airtime, Chiefs were still trying to decide whether or not to extend the meeting into the evening to deal with these resolutions. Federal party leaders will address the Assembly tomorrow, which is the last day of the Special Chiefs Assembly. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
And First Nations chiefs from Alberta and Saskatchewan say that two controversial bills in both provinces are undemocratic and an infringement of treaty rights. Alberta's Sovereignty Act gives the provincial government wide latitude to respond to federal laws. The Saskatchewan First Bill gives its government control over natural resources. The Chiefs are putting forward an emergency resolution at the Assembly of First Nations Special Assembly to reject the proposed legislation. National Chief Roseanne Archibald says the rights of Indigenous people predate Canada.
These bills have a specific agenda, and it all comes down to lands and resources. So we are yet again, not being respected. People are not understanding that treaty rights are not just rights that we hold. It's rights that everybody holds in the provinces of Saskatchewan and in the province of Alberta.
Alberta's bill has been criticized for giving the Premier and Cabinet unchecked powers to pass laws behind closed doors, although amendments to change that have recently been put forward. First Nations in Ontario are calling on the province to repeal Bill 23. According to the Chiefs, the More Homes Built Faster Act was pushed through the legislature on November the 28th without any consultation with First Nations.
I referenced that.
The Chiefs also say the change in legislation weakens conservation, land use planning, and environmental protections across the province, and that the bill is a clear violation of First Nations' inherent treaty rights. Chief Mary Duckworth from Caldwell First Nation supports the call for immediate discussions with the province.
I say to the Government of Ontario, come and meet with us, Chiefs. We are the rights holders. We are not stakeholders. Let's do something serious. If you want to build 1.5 million homes, I say build them, but you're not taking our green spaces, you're not tearing down our trees, and you are not going to poison our water and our air.
The opening ceremonies of the UN's COP15 conference on biodiversity in Montreal included an Indigenous welcome, Indigenous performances, and Indigenous objections. And while Quebec and Canada made financial commitments for change out of the gate, they were also met with an impromptu protest. Amelia Fournier and Tom Fenario report.
The Arctic in the north, vast and filled with unexpected life.
As the Prime Minister was touting Canada's diversity at COP15, this happened. A group of about 10 First Nations land defenders interrupted the COP15 opening ceremonies. Trudeau stood silently for almost 3 minutes as the demonstrators, mostly young women, eventually filed out of the room.
As you can also see, Canada is a place of free expression, where individuals and communities are free to express themselves openly and strongly. and we thank them for sharing their perspectives.
Longtime Ganyagahaga activist Alan Gabriel says the protest expressed what was on a lot of Indigenous people's minds.
They brought attention to what is actually going on in Canada, that Canada is not the perfect country that it tries to portray to the rest of the world, that Indigenous people are the last people who get their rights respected, if at all.
Back up on the podium, the UN Secretary General spoke against putting business before the environment, saying that we are at war with the planet and that governments must make it right.
Plans that recognize and protect the rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities who have always been the most effective guardians of biodiversity.
It wasn't all just talk at the opening. Trudeau committed $350 million towards international biodiversity on top of the 2021 commitment of $5.3 billion over 5 years.
By 2030, we must halt and reverse biodiversity loss.
But many here feel Trudeau lost credibility following his government's purchase of the multi-billion-dollar Trans Mountain pipeline.
Indigenous people still have to face the criteria of government before anything is accepted, and they always have the last say.
Quebec Premier François Legault also committed $650 million over 7 years.
We will support the creation of new protected areas initiated by Indigenous peoples, and we will also make use of the expertise of Indigenous peoples in order to preserve biodiversity.
But the Legault government has recently been pushing for environmentally disruptive projects like lithium mining and hydro dams. Gabriel says big government can't have it both ways.
And I think that's the weakness of Canada, is there's a lot of rhetoric, there's a lot of stuff on paper, but in actuality, none of those things are really being implemented.
COP15 will run until December 19th in Montreal. A story by Amelia Fournier, APTN National News, Montreal.
The rate of violence against Inuit women is 14 times higher than the national average. That's why it's no surprise that the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women drew a crowd in Iqaluit. Around 100 people gathered at Iqaluit's Four Corners intersection to support victims of violence. From there, it was a brief march to Iqaluit Museum. Nunavut has the country's highest rate of female victims of family violence. The territory also has the highest rate of crime reported to police in the country. And when it comes to violent crime, it sits at 6 times the national average. All right, we have to step aside for a short break. We'll have more news when we come back. Welcome back to APTN National News. The COVID-19 pandemic may be considered over for some, but recovery efforts in the form of investments by the federal government are still coming through. For example, $10 million earmarked for harm reduction programs. While speaking in Toronto recently, Mental Health and Addictions Minister Carolyn Bennett said Canadians are in the midst of what she calls a parallel pandemic caused by increasing abuse of hard drugs. The $10 million committed by her government will be used to fund 16 Indigenous-led healing, mental health, and drug prevention programs.
When you see someone who's intoxicated, and ask what's the matter with them, you have to know you're asking the wrong question. The question is what happened to them. And that's why dealing with trauma informed and the effects of colonization, we have to have everybody aware about really the path to sort of difficult and now dangerous behavior because of the toxic drug supply.
Tom Jackson has been going across Canada to help raise money for many important causes in different Canadian cities, and last night he made a stop in Winnipeg with his Stories, Song and Santa Causes tour. Take a look.
God rest ye merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay. Remember Christ our Savior was born upon this day to save us all from Satan.
So leap, learn, laugh. And what would the last one be? Love. Exactly. That's a social prescription. So when you're not feeling up to par, leap, learn, laugh, and love. I promise you, it'll make you feel better.
Christmas Day, Mary saved us all from Satan's power. 3 for him who made us all. 3 for him who made us all. 3 to him who made us all.
Tom has been doing concerts like this for over 3 decades, and his efforts have raised an estimated $250 million in cash and in-kind donations for food banks and disaster relief. I spoke with Tom a little earlier this week. Tom, it's great to have you join us here in studio. Now, many people will be familiar with your long-running holiday show, the Huron Carol, but what can people expect with this Stories, Songs, and Santa Clauses tour?
We have a commitment to bring people joy, to make them happy, because happy is healthy. And if we can make them happy, we can make them healthy. And if in fact we do that, we get to lift this weight that's been on people's shoulders for 2 years. And we've learned to live under the impact of COVID, but we have to get out of that. And we have to figure out how to have our children laugh, figure out how to make love a verb. Well, we don't actually have to figure that out, because we already know that, right? I mean, Christmas is a verb. That's why I don't just celebrate Christmas this year. Be Christmas.
Right. Yeah.
You've always done that anyway. I mean, for as long as you've been alive, Christmas was always a special event, and it was always special for children. And it's more important this year to concentrate on your children than it has ever been, because of the impact that this globe has had on our children. When they sit in front of televisions and they watch the news, or you hear about the impact of this conflict in overseas, and they get depressed. So we have to change that, right? Give them a hug. There's a difference between a hug and a hold, by the way. You can give them a hold. This is a hug. Okay, that's a hug. This is a hold.
Well, certainly well said there, Tom. And now, as we mentioned in the intro, your philanthropy work over the decades has raised roughly like $250 million for those in need. Why has this work been so important for you?
Well, it's become my oxygen. I don't know what I would do if I wasn't in the world to help someone else. So I made a deal. I'm an old pool player, so I keep my deals. And I made a deal with a stranger who visited me 34 years ago. And I was living in a space that I was the architect of. It was a dark space. And this angel came to visit me, right? Real or not, said to me, I'm going to make you a deal if you want. I'm going to send you an angel that's worse off than you. And if you help that angel, I'm going to help you. So I took the deal and I said, how will I recognize the angel? And he said, you won't. So I went looking and I found that there were lots of angels that were worse off than me. And that brought me here to you.
And Tom, your Christmas tour is in support of food banks. Did you ever think that after all of these years of helping to raise funds for food banks, that need would continue to grow?
I think I knew that. There's always a gap between the haves and the have-nots, and that gap seems to be widening. And yeah, there are greater solutions that I possess. I'm just a Band-Aid guy, but I'm going to keep them alive and happy until you figure it out.
And you've received just about every major honor there is in Canada. I mean, the Juno, the Gemini Order of Canada. Is there any other achievement you'd like to check off your own Christmas wish list?
I think that I'd like to have those accolades that were bestowed upon me, have them bestowed on the leadership that makes change now, today. I mean, our leadership, First Nation people, have leaders who make significant difference. I was in Kamloops just the other day, meeting with the chief, and the kind of things that she's doing over there need to be recognized. It's not just us looking for reconciliation. It's us teaching reconciliation. It's us leading others, show them that we can help them, right? It doesn't mean that we have to be like this. It means like we can go like this.
Yeah.
You know, and that there's a good lesson to be learned with that. We can lead by example. We can lead by helping others.
Well, Tom, that's a great way to end our little discussion here. Again, thank you so much for coming in and joining us and sharing a bit of your wisdom and your knowledge.
Yay. There's something that you can do. Stay with me for a minute. When we finish this conversation, I'd like you to go to the phone, wherever you are. Go to the phone, pick it up, and call somebody and tell them that you love them, and ask them to do the same thing. Because you know what's going to happen? In 5 minutes, the world will change. 5 minutes. I promise you.
Certainly powerful stuff there, Tom. Thanks so much for this.
See ya. Merry Christmas.
All right, it's time for one final break. After we come back, we'll have highlights of today's In Focus. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Our viewer Pearl McCarthy sent in this great shot of a sunrise she was able to enjoy just yesterday. Now, Pearl did not mention where this was, so maybe she's keeping this beautiful area a secret from us all. Thanks so much for that, Pearl. You can send your photos to share@aptn.ca, and don't forget to include any details that can help us enjoy the photo. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. We start on the East Coast, +5 in St. John's and 9 degrees in Halifax. 1 degree in Happy Valley Goose Bay and -13 in Kuujjuaq. 1 degree in Quebec City and -12 in Val-d'Or. 3 degrees in Toronto and -7 in North Bay. -13 in a mix of sun and cloud in Timmins and -13 in Sioux Lookout. -27 in Churchill and -21 in God's Lake. -16 in Barons River and clear and -11 in Winnipeg. Clear and -12 in Regina and -14 in Saskatoon. Snow and -14 in Buffalo Narrows and snow and -24 in Stony Rapids. Making our way west, snow and -11 in Fort Chipewyan and -11 in Peace River. -5 in Edmonton and -1 in Calgary. 7 degrees in Tofino and 4 in Campbell River. 3 degrees in Sands Pit and -20 in Fort Nelson. Some snow and -12 in Beaver Creek and -6 in Whitehorse. Snow and -32 in Norman Wells and -20 in Yellowknife. -25 in Inuvik and -27 in Colville Lake. -29 in Cambridge Bay and clear and -29 in Arviat. Snow and -24 in Igloolik and -9 in Iqaluit. A First Nation in British Columbia and the Provincial Ministry of Indigenous Relations have received a Public Service Award for signing a unique agreement. As part of treaty talks, Hatzel First Nation will run a ranch bought by the province. The ranch now provides beef for band members. APTN's Lee Wilson has more.
Hatzel First Nation have been in treaty talks with the BC government for decades. They were running into challenges because privately owned rangeland was part of their traditional territory. Last year, BC purchased a ranch, equipment, along with the Crown land to lease to the First Nation, which will be transferred to the nation when the treaty is finalized.
We have worked through our treaty process, negotiations and whatnot, and they had to think of an outside the box concept in regards to our negotiations for the range land that's all around our statement of intent area.
The first of its kind agreement was recently recognized with the BC Public Service Regional Impact Award, which recognizes a program or project benefiting an area. According to Hatzel Chief Sherry Sellers, food security has been a challenge due to low moose populations. The nation purchased beef from their ranch to provide to band members this Christmas,
which we give out actually at Christmas time. So it really helps the people get through after Christmas and whatnot, because of the lack of ability to do our moose hunting and whatnot in this area. there's such low counts and whatnot. So that's been helping us.
Sellers views BC purchasing the ranch and leasing it to the nation as a good start to reconciliation. But getting to the point where the land is part of their territory completely is what she truly wants for the nation.
In reality, I'd love to see us just be able to retain all of the land that's attached to the ranch, as well as the ranch itself. And it just to be put into our name, simple as that, and become a part of our reserve. That would be the best reconciliation to see.
Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Kitimat.
This week on APTN In Focus, we put Indigenous content creators, TikTokers, and influencers in focus. Here's a highlight of our show and how the need for Indigenous content online is growing. I guess, what does it take to be successful on social media? And I mean, there's a need for the program and there's a need for more Indigenous voices on these platforms. So what do you guys think it takes to be successful on these platforms?
Well, I think that it's always important to post authentically, and people really just want to see you at the end of the day, and the things that are important to you, and the things that you are excited to share. So for me, at least, that's what I try and focus on when I post.
Do you have any advice for people wanting to follow in your footsteps or get into acting, or maybe stunt performing or anything like that? Do you have any advice?
Well, just like I said, people are always going to talk, so you might as well give them something good to talk about. One thing that I notice come up a lot for people that are wanting to step into the spotlight is fear of what people think. And you just got to do you. And the more you share yourself and the more you share your heart, I find the more comes back to me in life in general. And I think it's so important to share who you truly are.
Indigenous content creators is really important because it's showing the world who we really are, and not just being a stereotype or an encyclopedia reference of the past of what once was.
It's been a tradition for a very long time. The reason why is because the baby feels safe and secure, and it makes them feel like they're in the womb again.
To have these people look up to me is like, I have tears.
All right, that's all we have for you tonight on APTN National News. For news anytime, you can head to our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Daryl Stranger. For all of us here, thank you so much for joining us, Miigwech, and have a great night.